Hi there, this is Jens from GraphAPI, and today I want to talk about GraphQL queries, and I want to show you how to execute queries using the GraphQL playground that we have on my.graphapi.com. If you want to try this yourself, just head over to my.graphapi.com, publish an API, and try it for yourself. We have a 14-day free trial, so very easy and quick to get something going. So let's look at here. We have a very small model here, just 3 types: post, user, and profile. We have only 5 posts. It's very simple. Let's over to the model here to show you one thing which is relevant later, which is we have a connection between posts and users. So posts belong to a user, or the other way around, user has made posts. Okay, let's head over to the playground. Here we already have one query, list posts. When I execute this query, you see that all the 5 posts will be returned because all of them have been created by the same user or with the same user ID. Now you see here I have different fields: ID, created at, title, user ID, status. I can obviously add other fields like the updated field, for example. That's all pretty easy to do. And one of the things which are very powerful for GraphQL, because the client actually defines how the response from the server looks like. So now let's add another query, which is called user with posts. And here you see it's the same ID. So actually it's the same user. And we have a couple more fields: email, first name, and then we have the post connection. If you remember from before, post belongs to a user. That means I can nest it inside a user, and I get now all the posts from a particular user. But we also have another thing here, which is fragments. But let's first execute the query. So you see here I have a user object with an email, first name, and then the post connection with the items. I get exactly the same items as before. The next token is null, which I will explain later. So the fragment is a concept where I can basically reuse this fragment in different queries. So here I have a fragment post fields on post. Post is the type, post fields is the name, and I have these fields in this fragment. And now you see referencing this just happens with 3 little dots and then the name. I can use this also here in above query and execute this, and you see the list post by user works in the same way. Another nice thing that I have, whatever, maybe I don't like this property. I could also call this, I don't know, demo. Maybe that's a user I want to have. And then you see that executing this returns, instead of list post by user, it returns like demo as a property, and inside demo you have the items. So with aliases, it's super easy to rename a query, and you can basically add this to every single field. I could also kind of just say I add an alias here, which is called posts, and execute this, and now we see I have demo and post. Well, that's super easy to do. So again, the client defines how the response from the server looks like. This is one of the key features of GraphQL. Now, obviously here we have a hard-coded value, and we don't want hard-coded values. So what I would do here, I would replace this with a variable, and I call this user ID. I need to pass this user ID. The type needs to be defined here, and I can define this here in the variables window, and it already proposes this. Okay. Now I have defined the variable user ID, and you see it still works. Everything is great. And let me also reference it here. So I will just copy this over and also reference the variable user ID from here. Okay, so if I execute this, you see I have the user object, email, first name, and so forth. Again, I could, if I want, if it makes sense, because I don't know, maybe I have a hard-coded user, then I would say I introduce an alias called Jens. Makes sense, potentially not. If I have a variable, it doesn't really make a lot of sense because a variable could have different values, but you can do this as you wish. You could, as I said, introduce something for every single field. So now you call this my email instead of just email. That's exactly as we did it before. It just works on any field that you can specify, which is a great feature. So now we covered arguments, we covered aliases and fragments. And there's one last thing which I want to show, which is using limit for pagination. So if I want to go here, for example, pass a new variable called limit, which is of type integer, I can add it to the post connection, and I can with that limit the response from the server. Now I get a next token. The next token I would use as an argument here as well. Let's say next token, and then copy the whole token, which is pretty lengthy, but doesn't really matter because you would always pass it as a variable. And then you execute it, and now you see I get the second post GraphQL versus REST. As this is pretty lengthy, I have to scroll all the way back. If I set limit to 5, then obviously next token would be null, as we've seen it before, because I only have 5 posts. If I want to have 2 times the same query, because that's something I can do as well, you can basically batch multiple queries which will be executed in parallel. I could say, okay, this is demo 1 and this is demo 2. And if I execute this, again, 2 queries, demo 1, demo 2. And let's do one last thing, we filter. And let's say we want to filter for the status field. And we say status field equals published. And I copy this over. And here we want to say draft. And let's call this drafts, and let's call these things here published. And now if I execute this, you will see I only get the published post in here. You see status field published, and I will get the drafts in the second property, drafts. So much for queries. We learned aliases, arguments, variables, fragments, a lot of different things. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like it, please subscribe and like it, and I'll see you next time. Bye.